Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, we're diving into a pretty interesting topic about Donald Trump's presidency. It's been reported that Trump signed just 5 bills into law while issuing a whopping 124 executive orders. So, what does this actually mean for his presidency?
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that's been getting a lot of attention lately. At first glance, those numbers seem a little surprising. I mean, you would think a president would be more active with passing legislation, right?
Exactly. Signing bills into law is traditionally seen as a major sign of a president's legislative success. But Trump's approach seems a bit different. He's used executive orders to bypass Congress, which, as we know, can be a controversial move.
And that's the key, isn't it? The fact that he issued so many executive orders raises some serious questions. What's the real difference between using executive orders and passing actual laws?
Right. Executive orders allow the president to make decisions on policy without needing Congress to pass a law. It's a way of getting things done quickly, but it's also a much more unilateral approach.
That's true. But I think it's important to note that while executive orders can be powerful, they're also limited. They can be reversed by the next president, so they don't carry the same long-term weight as laws passed by Congress.
That's a great point. And even though Trump's executive orders were numerous, they often dealt with issues that were already on his radar during his campaign. Things like immigration, trade, and deregulation were areas where he felt he could take action without waiting for Congress.
Exactly. And don't forget about the political dynamics at play. Trump had a Republican-controlled Congress during the first half of his presidency. But even then, he didn't really focus on pushing through major legislation. Some argue that it was because Congress was gridlocked or couldn't get on the same page.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. There's also the fact that Trump's style of leadership often seemed to rely on bold executive actions rather than the traditional process of bargaining and compromising with lawmakers.
And this is where things get interesting. With a president issuing so many executive orders, it's almost as if he's trying to shape the policy landscape on his own. But that doesn't always sit well with everyone. Some critics argue that bypassing Congress can undermine the democratic process.
Absolutely. And it's not just critics. There's also a certain level of frustration from the American public when they see a president taking unilateral action. Some argue it could create a precedent for future presidents to act with too much power.
Yeah, it does set a precedent. It's like the idea of executive overreach, when a president uses their authority in ways that seem to stretch the limits of their constitutional power.
And that's where the balance between executive orders and legislative action becomes so crucial. Laws passed by Congress have more staying power, and they typically reflect a broader consensus. But with executive orders, it's a quicker, more personal form of governance.
But here's the thing. Trump's executive orders were also often reversed by the next administration. So, in some ways, it feels like those actions were more symbolic than anything, like trying to get something done quickly, but not necessarily building a long-term legacy.
And that's the catch. Executive orders don't have the same permanence. Congress can eventually reverse them, and future presidents can undo them. So even though Trump's numbers seem impressive, they don't necessarily equate to long-term change.
That's an important distinction. Plus, by issuing so many executive orders, Trump may have avoided some of the political battles that come with negotiating and pushing bills through Congress. But then again, it didn't always result in lasting change.
It's a mixed bag, for sure. On one hand, it allowed him to move quickly on certain issues. On the other hand, it limited his ability to create lasting policy shifts. And for people who want stability, that can be frustrating.
And this brings up the broader question. Does the use of so many executive orders signal a breakdown in the legislative process? Are presidents relying more on their power to avoid the hard work of legislating?
That's a big question. It almost seems like we're moving away from the idea of the president working with Congress as equals. The system of checks and balances gets a little blurred when a president can just issue orders left and right.
That's true. And when you think about it, the role of Congress is supposed to be a critical check on presidential power. If the president can essentially sidestep that, it raises concerns about where the power truly lies.
Exactly. It's a fine line. Executive orders are a necessary tool, but too much reliance on them could weaken the legislative branch and, in the long run, undermine the democratic process.
So, after all this, what does it all mean for Trump's legacy? Will his executive orders be remembered as a symbol of efficiency, or will they be seen as a shortcut to real, lasting policy change?
I think it depends on perspective. For his supporters, the executive orders might be seen as a testament to his decisiveness and willingness to take action. For his critics, it might represent an overreach of presidential power.
And that's the tricky part. The legacy of any president is often shaped by how their actions are viewed over time. Executive orders may have been an effective tool in the moment, but will they stand the test of time?
It's certainly something to keep an eye on. As history unfolds, we'll get a clearer picture of the long-term impact of Trump's executive orders versus his more traditional legislative efforts.
And of course, it'll be interesting to see if future presidents follow his example or whether Congress will find ways to reassert itself.
Absolutely. So, while Trump's presidency has been full of executive orders, it's clear that the real impact of those orders might only be seen much later down the road. And that leaves us with a big question. Will future presidents use executive orders the same way, or will they work more collaboratively with Congress?